Vermintide 2, after years of waiting, is finally getting a versus mode. Well, maybe. Maybe not. After all, this isn't the first time they've tried it. There's a lot of complication that comes with trying to add a versus mode to this game, and I want to talk about it. Today, I'm going to tell you the story of Vermintide's versus mode, how it failed the first time, how it's trying again now, and what it actually plays like at the moment. This might be a little different from my other videos, but I hope you'll enjoy it anyway. Anyone who's played Vermintide for 2 seconds knows that it's heavily inspired by Left 4 Dead. Lots of Left 4 Dead players enjoy the Vermintide series because they're both quite similar and fun. But Left 4 Dead has always had something that Vermintide hasn't. A versus mode. Player versus player. PvP. Left 4 Dead's versus mode was extremely popular. So naturally, people have been asking for a versus mode in the rat click game ever since the first Vermintide came out in 2015. Whoa, what are you looking at? People would cry out from the streets up at the developer, "We see cool rat! We want to be cool rat!" Which is of course a completely understandable sentiment. So the player base waited, hoping for an update. The need to fulfill their rat desire growing stronger with each passing month. But after that first Vermintide came out, 3 years passed, and it never got a versus mode. Vermintide 2 is coming out soon. I bet it'll have a versus mode. But Vermintide 2 released in 2018, completely versusless. There was panicking, riots, human sacrifice, dwarves and elves living together, mass hysteria. Well, that's how I remember it. Anyway, jump to 2019, it's a full year after Vermintide 2's release. Developer Fat Shark, finally seeming to understand their players' needs to fulfill their rat desire, makes a public announcement. Versus mode is coming, baby! Look at this, we got a trailer and everything! Development updates! Woo, baby! Everybody's excited. Get ready. And then, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Months passed, years passed, everyone was confused. Is versus mode still coming out? Has it been canceled? As far as most people were concerned, it must have been permanently shelved. If you really went digging, you could find developer comments on Reddit and the forum saying, "We're still working on it," but most people just saw the trailer and never heard about it again. The reality was that versus mode had been canceled, practically speaking. After all, Vermintide 2's normal game modes at that time still needed stabilizing, and Space Vermintide may have been on the list of priorities after that. So for many years, Vermintide's versus mode really did get shelved, and nobody really knew for how long. Jump to the present day, 2024. It has been 5 years since that first announcement, and now Fat Shark is saying again, versus mode is coming, baby! The first time somebody told me that they were testing it again, I was like, yeah, man. Yeah, You'll have to forgive me for being skeptical at first. But the tests kept happening. 1 closed one, 2 open ones, all 3 tests having very important animal acronym names, and slightly more important changes between tests with player feedback, so it's feeling a lot more real this time. This time, versus mode might actually happen, and I personally hope that it does. Some of the most fun I've ever had in gaming has been in Left 4 Dead's versus mode and playing co-op in Vermintide 2. If they can successfully combine these 2 things, I will be very happy. But it is going to be an enormous challenge. After all, it failed the first time. It was trickier than they had realized it would be. Why was it so tricky? Well, I'll tell you, but first a quick word from the people funding the huge bag of treats I'm gonna buy for Dog Rack after this video goes live. Surfshark VPN. Talking about Fat Shark, Surfshark, what the hell's with all the sharks in this video? Sharkrac. Surfshark VPN protects your online personal data. You can swap your real device location for some other one across the globe, and you have a lot of options to choose from. I have a surprising amount of viewers from countries where access to YouTube has been blocked before. Let's say you live in one of these lawless wastelands, like Brazil or Germany, and you're thinking, during the next government coup, if they ban YouTube for good this time, how will I be able to watch my favorite Verac videos? Worry not. With a VPN, you can bypass this censorship. You're welcome. Panada Gengishin. As for me in America, I use a VPN to protect my personal data, because I don't appreciate the Zuck trying to gather everything on me all the time. So, using a VPN gives me a little peace of mind. You guys can use my code Verac when you sign up to get 4 extra free months. And they provide a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to just trying it out. To sign up, you can check the link in the description below. Thank you very much to Surfshark. Now, back to the video! Why would it be so tricky to implement a Left 4 Dead-like versus mode into Vermintide 2? To some veterans of both series, this might seem obvious, but I've talked to a lot of people who have played one or both games, and they don't understand why it wouldn't be a shoo-in. So let me explain. Much like a rat, the problem has many layers to it. I don't think that analogy worked at all, but I'm not removing it, so just bear with me here. The problem has many rat-like layers. For one thing, the expectations have been completely all over the place due to the handling of the announcements so many years ago. There are still probably a fair amount of people who don't even know the mode is happening because they've given up thinking it could happen at all. And maybe they don't keep up with the game anymore, so they're not gonna hear about it. I'd wager there's an even greater number of people who plain aren't interested in the idea anymore now that the game has had time to develop its own identity as a solid co-op adventure game, or a roguelike if you're playing Chaos Wastes, or a we don't talk about weaves, that one doesn't get a category. But there's another problem, and this is the huge one. This is part of why Versus was put on hiatus in 2019. Vermintide, simply put, was not built for PvP. Its inspiration, Left 4 Dead, was built with PvP in mind, but it wasn't just built with PvP in mind. Here's something a lot of people don't know. Left 4 Dead initially intended for Versus to be the only game mode. Valve made a foundation intended for player versus player gameplay, then added bots that could take the place of players later. Fat Shark is in the unenviable position of retooling their entire game to make PvP work. Vermintide's maps were not designed for Team Rat players to choose clever hiding spots to ambush Team Hero players. This is why half of the specials were designed to just throw shit at you from a distance, or to lock onto your ass from a mile away from their spawn. The weapons were not designed for a satisfying PvP balance. They were designed so that you, as the hero, can satisfyingly pop a rat from across the map the moment you so much as hear it breathe. Not to mention the entire RPG-like power system on the weapons and the items that you can equip that would put players on completely different planes of usefulness in a versus mode if they had their pick of what items they could equip, like in the regular game. The careers with their passives and their special abilities and the talent trees, holy shit! None of this was intended to work for player versus player. Everything balance-wise in Vermintide 2 has been designed to cater to the Ubersreich 5, and for obvious reasons. For 6 years, they've been the only playable characters. Fat Shark only needed to worry about making the Survivor player's experience satisfying. We wanted to slap rats. Who cares if it wasn't that balanced? Great example here. One of Saltspire's careers, the DLC one, with the appropriate talents can, all with one button press, revive somebody at a distance, give them a shield that makes them invincible for 5 to 10 seconds, heals them based on how much damage they took within the last 3 seconds, and then explodes. Imagine fighting against this as a rat player. The point is, the developers of Versus Mode are saddled with 6 years of rat screwing balance decisions that they need to unscrew to make this Versus Mode even playable. What are they gonna do? What can they do to balance all these things for PvP with every talent of every class and every weapon of every hero and every design choice of every map? All these RPG-esque mechanics intended for co-op and not a PvP game? They'd have to implement a fuckload of changes. What would possibly be the solution here to make this work? Well, I'll tell you. It's called implementing a fuckload of changes. Codename FOC, or FOC for short. Remember that Saltspire career ability? What if we made it so that it still does most of that crazy shit, but what if it only makes you invincible for 2 to 5 seconds instead of 5 to 10, and maybe lower the damage on the explosion a little bit? There's an elf career called Sister of the Thorn. It comes with a ranged weapon that lets you force lift any rat you want, even the specials. So we're slapping a 40-second cooldown on that for using it against rat players. Gotta do that. Oh, and reduce the damage of all crossbows heroes. And that temporary HP mechanic that everyone loves so much, put it into the fucking ground! That's just a few special changes from the most recent public test that I played. These are things that the developers deemed necessary, most of which I would say I agree with, because otherwise, the heroes would just steamroll the rats every game. The most recent test I played was called the Returning Alpha Test, or the RAT. I'm going to talk about my experiences with it in a second. The short of it is, I had a lot of fun, but I was also, on occasion, extremely frustrated. Fat Shark has a history of announcing and releasing projects well before they're finished. Versus mode included. Many of you know I have criticized them for this before. But as far as I'm aware, Versus mode is not being packaged as a separate game that you have to buy as DLC. And as long as that's the case, as long as it's a free and separate game mode, I am cautiously optimistic, because I would very much like to see a versus mode in this game. To see that happen though, it'll need to be relatively balanced for both teams. They're gonna need to enact the master plan, aka FOC, which means they're gonna need a lot of testing and a lot of player feedback. So, I intend on giving it to them. Most of what I'm saying here are opinions that I've already submitted to them on my feedback form. But I'm large and obnoxious, so I feel the need to talk about it out loud to a microphone as well. I'm gonna talk broad strokes first, then how it feels to play each specific rat. The rules are basically the same as Left 4 Dead's versus mode. Man-Things, heroes, are offense, rats are defense. Man-Things gain points for progressing in the level, and the rats want to kill them all so they don't get any points. There's no time limit, but there's also very few supplies and no respawns for the heroes. Once all the Man-Things die or safely reach the end of the level, the teams swap and play on the same map again. The team with the highest points after 2 separate maps wins. Now, I played on 3 different days. First with a full party, then with 2 friends, then by myself, so I could get a rounded experience. They're testing out their modified PvP maps out 1 day at a time, so the first day we played nothing but the map Screaming Bell, and then for the other 2 days it was the map Against the Grain. I think these are good maps to test out, specifically because of how different they are, one being lots of tight corridors, and the other with a bunch of wide open areas. Now, I don't know if it was just because it was the first time, or because I was streaming, or because of my stupid idiot friends who are bad at video games, because obviously I would never make a mistake, but the Screaming Bell was a completely unfun shit show. It is pure hell. The map is so tight and congested that it really only takes 1 poison globadier to fuck up the entire survivor team. And ironically though, when you're playing as the rats, when you're in the areas of the map that are slightly more open, you have really bad, limited, predictable spawning areas because you can only spawn where people can't see you and if you're far away enough. We quit after 3 matches that day and had significantly more fun playing Chaos Wastes for the rest of the night. The second day was better. Against the Grain is a much more fun map to play on than Screaming Bell, in my opinion. It feels like you have more options. You can be a little more creative with your spawns because it's so big and there are hills and trees to hide behind and all sorts of stuff like that. I got one of them. I brought 2 different friends with me that day, and although we had fun, I could tell that the lack of healing in the spawn and the war of attrition style that this game mode currently is was getting kind of frustrating. On the 3rd day, I played solo. I won nearly every game that day, and I started to wonder, am I just better than all of my friends at video games? Does party size have a— Yes! Yes, I am! I am God's gift to gaming! Well, no, not really. I'm an okay Vermintide player. Many of my friends who are very good at other games, way better than me, they just don't have the Vermintide blocking, dodging, pushing cycle ingrained into their muscle memory. So they understandably take a little bit of chip damage here and there. Combine that with the fact that the starting area has no healing whatsoever, and being anything other than an experienced Vermintide veteran suddenly feels very punishing. Point is, if they're looking to bring in a new wave of players to this 6 6-year-old game, I think the way that it's balanced at the moment is not gonna work out. And the friends I was playing with were not brand new players. I'm talking about the people who might come to Vermintide 2 specifically so that they could try the versus mode. I'm talking about Kevin on Xbox. I can already hear some of you saying, no, we don't want the casuals to play with us. But listen, Fortnite Kevin is an important part of the PvP ecosystem, and many of you used to be him and you're not going to admit it. Without Kevin, there's nobody to dunk on. Kevin has to have an experience that is just frustrating enough so that he wants to get good at the game so that he can go toe-to-toe with you and maybe even dunk on you someday, but not so frustrating that he doesn't ever want to play again. And that means finding a healthy balance between the people who need to get good and the people who probably need to go outside a little more often. If versus mode goes live without that balance, the PvP ecosystem will be disrupted. Over time, fewer and fewer people will bother with the game mode at all. And instead of Fortnite Kevin getting dunked on, you, because you're not nearly as good as you think you are at PvP, will be getting dunked on by the only 8 other people, the hyper-autismos and or cheaters that will be left playing this game if that ecosystem is disturbed. And Fat Shark isn't gonna bother finishing a game mode if they think the passenger limit for a minivan is the final average amount of people playing it. They already did that with Winds of Magic, and that one they tried to make people pay for. So what are some things we can do to find a healthy middle ground between the people who need to get good and the people who need to eat grass? Well, for one thing, I want to praise them. They've made 2 pre-made loadouts built with weapons and talents for every hero class. I think that is an amazing idea. There are way too many fucking talents given out all at the same time for the average new player to figure out, and even if they did figure them out, what happens if they queue up with all their talents picked and ready and then they don't get to play as the hero that they wanted to? So I love what Fat Shark did here with this specific example. What I'd like to see them do is do this for a few other things. For example, how the balance of healing works. Having no healing in the spawn and mostly secret out of the way healing for new players is pretty brutal. And since we're changing how so many other things work, what if we changed how the spawn healing items work specifically instead of removing them entirely? Maybe you spawn in and each player has a mini health kit, like the ones that you have to stand still for to use, the bandages, but maybe they heal for less and they don't take you off death's door, but they'll give you just enough raw health back that you'll be able to take a little bit more chip damage from the regular horde rats. This might be enough to let new players make some more mistakes and learn how to get good at the game without overpowering veteran Ubersreich 5 teams. What I'm suggesting is essentially add pills from Left 4 Dead into this versus mode. They work in that game, you might as well try it out in one of the tests, see if it works or not. And granted, they might just not work in Vermintide 2 for some reason that I haven't foreseen yet. And that's okay. I'm not looking to be one of these people who just bitches and moans all day. I want to actually propose some ideas. And if you have any ideas of your own, please do let me know in the comments, and let Fat Shark know. Play the next test when it goes live and make sure to put in that feedback form. And as far as the hero classes go, I tried out as many as I could, but I couldn't play all of them in the amount of time that I had. My general impression is that any class that has damage reduction or a shield is ridiculously overpowered. Teams that were made up of at least 2 of these types of classes always seem to perform better than any other team composition. Now, it might also be the case that other classes are good, but the meta just hasn't really sort of been discovered yet. So on that note, as far as the hero classes go, if I had to guess a top 3, I would say Ironbreaker, Foot Knight, and Handmaiden in no particular order. Those 3 classes, I saw so much success from people playing them. They were able to block, they were able to move, they were able to reduce the amount of damage taken, and when there's so little healing in this war of attrition game mode, it seemed that they were the most fit for survival. Now let's talk about the rats. When you're on the Pact Sworn team on defense, you can play as the following following special rats: Gutter Runner, or the Assassin, Rattling Gunner, or Rattling, Poison Wind Globadier, or Poison Fucker Constant Damage Fart Globe Bastard, the Packmaster, the Warp Fire Thrower, and the biggest rat of all, the Bile Troll. You can't play as the other tanks at the moment, but I'm okay with that because I'm willing to wait until they figure out fully how the Bile Troll should fit in. You can't play as the Nurgle Wizard guy, which is fine because mechanically he's lame. You can't play as the Blightstormer either though, which is lame because he's cool. And I want to spin people around, but I also get why that would probably be harder to balance. It's kind of an insane toolkit on the Blightstormer. Anyway, Gutter Runner. Playing the Gutter Runner made me feel like that big gangly reviewer guy from Ratatouille. The one that eats the ratatouille and then suddenly feels like he's a kid again. Because I cannot tell you how many hours I spent playing as a hunter in Left 4 Dead trying to get the perfect pounce from 5 miles away. And this took me back to that feeling in a very good way. The air control, the sound, and the chaos that happens when you pounce somebody. Oh, the adrenaline, it all feels great. But everything else about him juts me back into being that big, scary, gangly man a little earlier than I would like. The Assassin feels very stiff. This applies to all the rats, but it's especially noticeable when using the Assassin because he's supposed to be so agile. You can't wall jump, you can't hop halfway up a wall and then start climbing. You have to use these manual climbing animation icons that put you into third person. Really don't like these. Makes me feel out of control of my character and vulnerable, like I'm gonna get shot in the back of the head at any moment. I really don't like this UI that shows how the pounce works either. Intuitively, it looks like a charge meter, almost like an acceleration with 3 bars implying that you could maybe jump at a short, medium, and heavy power level. It's not. You have to charge it all the way, every single time, to pounce. You miss your landing, you need to charge it again. You get a smoke bomb as a failsafe if you miss your pounce, which is kind of cool, but if you fail to pounce, 90% of the time, you just get instantly eviscerated. Ironically, you bump this up to 95% when you use the smoke bomb because using it forces you to stand still, which is extra time to line up that shot. Rattling Gunner. The Rattling Gunner's supposed purpose is to provide suppressive fire and screw up the survivor's aim. I only felt useful as this guy a handful of times. He doesn't do much damage, and his suppressive fire ability is just more of a distraction than anything, and not in a good way when he's so loud and easy for other non-suppressed players to shoot. Worse than that, when the enemy team has 1 or 2 shields, they literally just ignore you. Everything the Rattling does for range and damage, the Globadier does better. And if I wanted to suppress one specific hero's ability to aim, I'd probably just pounce on them as an assassin instead. Packmaster. The Packmaster, with the Assassin, are the only classes that can fully incapacitate people requiring a teammate to help them. The Packmaster can grab somebody, drag them away, and string them up. It is very satisfying to do, but god do they make you work for it. Not only is he slow, he is loud. I'd say a solid 9 out of 10 Packmasters I saw during Versus Week, myself included, would spawn, take 5 steps out from their cover, and get immediately brained. Unleash the muscle. No brain. Warp Fire Thrower. On the Screaming Bell map, this guy felt absolutely insanely overpowered. His flamethrower is short range, but it blinds you, screws up your aim, damages you, and pushes you around all at the same time. On Against the Grain, picking the Warp Fire Thrower felt more situational, and I prefer that. You pick him up if you see that they're coming up to a choke point or around a corner. He's gonna be way too oppressive on certain maps if they keep him the way he is, but on Against the Grain, I like where he felt balance-wise. And now for the biggest rat of all, the Bile Troll. The Bile Troll is the first playable boss that they've added, and I'm glad they chose him instead of the Rat Ogre, because the Rat Ogre is just the tank from Left 4 Dead. So the Troll has the potential to be a little more interesting and different. In the regular game, the Troll will fall down and regenerate health once he hits half, and he'll puke all over you too. In Versus, his gameplay is a little different. Yeah, it's insane. You just hit left click for a light attack over and over, and there is nothing the heroes can do about it. If they attack, they're dropping their block, and then they get hurt because you attack so fast. If they block, they lose stamina every time you hit them, and you're fast enough that you can just keep hitting them over and over and over. The only time I saw trolls lose at all was if the heroes came prepared with bombs and just insta-gived him. So I have no idea if the regen mechanic was even implemented or not. I can tell you that the puke ability was implemented, and it is not worth using. You can't really aim it. It makes you stand still. It's not obvious what it does for damage or blinding or slowing because there's not really a visible effect on them, and you're wasting time by not sprinting at them with your giant troll legs and mashing mouse 1 to be as oppressive as possible. Sorry, did I say the bile troll was the biggest rat of all? That was a good joke, but completely wrong. The biggest rat, the pact sworn at the very top of the rat dominance hierarchy, is the poison wind globadier, and it's not even close. The amount of damage you do with this guy for how little risk is involved is absolutely bonkers. It is straight up bananas. You throw a globe of this fart gas. It obscures the hero's vision. It damages them immediately in a giant AoE. It denies the area so that they have to either not walk through it or choose to walk through it and take damage. And it just generally causes chaos. And if you do it right, they won't even see you throw it because you can throw it in an arc over the cover you're hiding behind. You reload the globe fairly quickly too, practically by the time the first gas cloud just barely ends. And as if he needed more defensive options, the globadier is able to operate so far away from the heroes that he can abuse the get closer to heroes button to respawn every time he attacks. Throw a globe, run backwards while reloading, press Q, and you can go ghost mode and respawn anywhere you want near the heroes again. They'll be looking for you behind them, it doesn't matter. You're above them now, throwing it back on the roof. The globadier was the only pact sworn that felt extremely strong on both maps that I played, and for very little risk compared to what the other rat classes have to deal with to get even a smidgen of the globadier's constant damage. Oh yeah, and if I didn't mention it till now, you can generally have 2 rats of the same class and then 2 other different ones on the team at the same time. So if you have 2 poison globadiers, you can just win the game. One time a bug happened where my team got 3 globadiers, and that was a very, very fun time. For me. Not for the enemy team. Last thing I'll mention before wrapping this video up, if you're playing as the heroes, you get AI controlled teammates if there isn't a human player available. On Team Rat, you don't. I don't know if they're gonna fix this later or what, but it leads to the start of some of these games giving the heroes a hugely imbalanced lead just because the matchmaking happened to let them go first in a 2v2. Anyway, that's all my feedback for now. I want to reiterate and say that I really want this versus mode to happen. Vermintide 2 was not designed for PvP, so it's going to take a lot of changes, a lot of testing, and a lot of feedback to really make it feel like it works. Fat Shark has a history of releasing things too early. This time, it appears that they're trying to test it and get it right before it really releases in its full form. Fat Shark has a history of implementing kind of gross microtransactions into their recent games as well. Versus mode, as far as we're aware at the moment, doesn't have that either. So as long as they stay on the current course, Vermintide 2 might not just get a functional versus mode that brings in new life to the game. The game mode might actually also be good. Of course, there's never any guarantees with these things that are still in production, but at the moment, I'm cautiously optimistic. And Fat Shark, not only am I looking forward to the next test, but I have been resisting the urge to call you Fart Shark every single time that I name drop you throughout this video, and I might have slipped up once or twice. I don't remember. You have no idea how hard this is on me. Anyway, here's hoping it's a good versus mode. Whoa, baby! Might not be as many 4 stacks playing, but I can imagine there's probably at least several groups of.
What do you mean, Verac? Do you think Vermintide players do not have friends? Is that what you're saying?
Listen, as a Vermintide player, I can say that, okay? It's my game.
Yeah.
It's my word. I can say that.
It's my word. It's my game. I'm taking it back.
It's my word.
Oh, what? was around the cover. How did that hit me?
Ooh, I fell out of the map. Yeah, boy, most total kills and range kills and most revives. Oh my god.
What?
I am so good. I had all the green circles.
Look at your screen. We tied for revives.
No, I had most revives. I have the green circle for it.
No. Get the cat. Get the cat out of the way.
After all, Vermintide 2's normal game modes at that time. Very cool. Very fucking cool. Can I stop getting air raided, please? Anyway.